Welcome to Tell the Story, the podcast that's redefining what it means to thrive after a life of service. I'm Doug White, a veteran, retired first responder, and author of Hiding in Plain Sight, the truth about trauma, service, and the way forward. I've lived through the highs and the lows, and the battles that no one's talking about. And I know this, your story isn't over. This isn't just another podcast about service. This is about what comes next, how we move beyond the challenges, own our journeys, and build a future of strength, purpose, and growth. Here at Tell the Story, we cut through the noise with real unscripted conversations, bringing you hard-earned insights, actionable strategies, and we push to do the hard work so you can show up as the best version of yourself for your family, for your community, and for your mission. I sit down with those who've been there, veterans, first responders, their families, and thought leaders, to talk about resilience, leadership, mental fitness, and navigating the transitions that life throws at us. It's not about trauma. It's about what comes next. These conversations matter, and they can save lives. Tell the Story is proudly fueled by Polestar Coffee, crafted for those who push boundaries every day. Check them out at polestarcoffee.com. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button, leave a 5-star review, and share this episode because these stories need to be heard. Now let's get into it. Today we have a powerhouse guest joining us, someone who's not only walked the walk, but has spent years giving others a platform to tell their stories. James Geering is a former firefighter and paramedic who spent 14 years serving both the East and West Coast of the United States. He is the host of the Behind the Shield podcast, a platform dedicated to improving mental and physical health for first responders, military personnel, and medical professionals. James has more than 1,000 episodes and millions of downloads in what he calls a free library of resources. Behind the Shield has become one of the most impactful podcasts in the tactical community. James is also the author of One More Light, Life, Death, and Humanity Through the Eyes of a Firefighter, and a raw and gripping look into the realities of the fire service in his latest book, Kinder, which explores leadership, mental wellness, and what it truly means to take care of those who serve. James is a passionate advocate for firefighter health, leadership reform, and the 24/72 model. He combines his experience, research, and real-world conversations to push for a healthier and more sustainable approach to the job. If you're in a world of service, leadership, or you just want to know what it takes to build resilience in high-stress environments, then this is the episode for you. Welcome to Tell the Story. Hey, buddy, how you doing?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Man, I've made myself busier than I need to be.
You and me both. I was kind of catch up on the time I took off over the holidays, which wasn't even that much, and I over-recorded. I've got like a month and a half's worth of stuff, which is at 3 a week is a shitload of interviews. So I'm pumping the brakes the next couple of months.
I've had to do the same thing. I don't know how to do easy. So I went all in. I had no idea what I was doing when I started this. And I launched the podcast and the book on the same day. And I'm trying to learn what it means to be a published author, a marketing person, an entrepreneur, a podcaster, a producer, and social media, all of the stuff that goes along with it. I'm doing it all myself. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I've had as many as 5 in a week that I've done. And I found out quickly that 1 hour episode is 8 hours. And that's if I don't read the book. If I read the person's book, it's an 18-hour gig. And, I've decided instead of doing 2 a week or 1 a week, I'm going to do 1 every 2 weeks.
Excellent.
I need to slow down. I need to concentrate on the book. I need to concentrate on not necessarily a course, but a keynote. So try to drive this stuff forward, look into legislation, help out where I can and stuff like that. But man, this has been something else. And I've got to tell you, reading first, I did 2 things. I read Kinder, and then I listened to the audiobook and went back and kept up with the print and then the audiobook. And I've got to tell you, buddy, I don't know if you've ever read the book Once an Eagle.
No.
It's a novel. It's fantastic. It spans the character's life from the war across the border into Mexico back in the early 1900s. And it goes all the way up to Indochina. And it follows this guy who wins the Medal of Honor in World War I and serves through World War II. But the reason I'm telling you this is because the novel was incredibly written. You want to believe that it's historical, even though it's historical fiction. But the descriptive writing and the alliteration in this novel they would describe a taste or a sight or just something, and it was so descriptive that in your mind's eye, you were there, you could see it. You know, if they described a taste, you could taste it because it was so well done. And I've got to tell you, man, the ways that you describe things, and I'm going to tell you, and this is, I don't want to dissuade anybody from reading this. From the very first paragraph of the book, you grab me by the throat. And every page drags me deeper and deeper into a dark closet and just beats the ever-loving shit out of me.
And that's the point. At first, until you see the hope and redemption.
Yes. And that's the magic part, and that's where the tabbing and the notes and stuff coming in. But it is so real that I found myself, I had to step away from the book. At first I was reading it in chunks, and then I couldn't stop. I was like, I've got to have more of this, And then when I put the book down, so I put my earbuds in and just picked up there, and I couldn't have enough of it. I was trying to describe it to my son, who is interested in movies and wants to write films and direct and all that stuff. I was like, bro, I've got a book for you. You want to write movies and direct movies? I've got a book that has to be a movie. It has to be a movie. But I was describing to him how descriptive you were in your writing, and I went to one of the calls later in the book. It was the overturned vehicle on I-4. And I want to say it felt more relatable because I knew the places you were talking about. You know, the sea of red lights showing you that the parking garage was full. It's like, man, I know that parking garage. I know where he's talking about. I know the bathroom next to the escalator. I know exactly where he's at. So anyway, I was able to paint that picture. But when you climbed inside the car and spoke of the smell of zinc and automobile coolant, the smell, I stopped and I actually said out loud, I said, that has a taste too. Mm-hmm. I tried to explain to my son that those two smells, when you smell them, you know exactly what they are. And if they're in strong enough concentration, i.e., you're in an upside down vehicle and you're basically waiting in it, the smell is so strong you can taste it. And when I read that part, I could taste it. I mean, that's how powerful this book is and how powerful writing is. It is a gift. And man, as I read every page, it was like, man, this is Kinder is a whole different thing. It is a whole different thing. It's like nothing I've never been exposed to.
That is so good to hear. Because I mean, I've used the phrase many times, grab people by the throat. And this is it. And it's funny. I'll give you a story. It kind of tags onto what you said with your son.
Bro, this is bag over the head and getting the shit kicked out of you.
But this is what we need. This is where we actually live, you know. And I'm just watching a show called The Pit at the moment, which is set in ER in Pittsburgh. Really, really good show. Very gritty as well. They've got to do a little Hollywoodizing to kind of explain. So they're describing a lot of the things they do that you obviously just wouldn't. You just get on with it. But there's an absolute need for it for people to understand, well, what are they doing? But I have a friend who's an author, Irish guy, who's made films as well. And I've kind of been hoping that visceral reaction, you know, Josh Brolin, who hasn't read it yet, or some of my other actor friends, like, oh, James, just me to make this, and, you know, hold my hand and I'll lead you to the director. And Colin had the same thing with his latest book. And it was so beautiful because I'm calling all these people hoping that someone will be that door that opens, because I want to get it onto the screen. That's the ultimate thing. Then I've hit all the medium. Like there's no other medium I can get into where I've missed someone. But I guess stage would be the only one. But and then he said to me, he was waiting for that person, and he goes, then I looked in the mirror and I was like, what am I doing? I'm that person. And his message to me was basically, write the screenplay. You've written the book. This is your words. Write the screenplay. Make the movie. So it's funny you say that, because I'm probably going to post today. This is the next, we talked about being outside our comfort zones and doing new things like writing books and podcasts. Well, that's the next one is, all right, well, if it's going to be done the way I want it to be done, I need to write the screenplay too. So this journey will lend you down so many different paths. You know, if you told James or Doug 15 years ago that you'd be podcasting and writing books, you'd be like, fuck off.
That's it. The hell's a podcast? Nobody's got time for that shit. Exactly.
Sounds like some hippy dippy shit.
Too busy working.
Being a man.
Yeah.
But I mean, that that means so much. Because, I mean, we've talked about it. You know, you write a book, it's not like thousands just fly off the shelf. It's a very slow burn, but it's the quality over quantity. And if it hit you that way, then, you know, it does make me feel so good. Because even if you, I don't know if you noticed, if you were following along, there are some typos still in the book. And then there's a couple of sentences that got turned around. I mean, you probably only notice it if you wrote it, but
when I'm bored, I look for that stuff in books and papers and research. So when I'm bored, like the Florida Legal Guidelines and the statute book, I find them all over the place because I'm bored, and that's what my mind reverts to. This, man, and unless you wrote in there and like on one line, Doug is an asshole, I would not have caught it. I was waiting for the next page. Like I would turn the page and I'd already have my finger indexing the next page, just waiting to turn. James, buddy, I got to tell you, man, no written word has ever hit me like this. I mean, I was there. I was there with Jack on the calls, the near saves, bro. I mean, there was a point that, I mean, I went dark. I mean, like inward dark for a couple of days, and there was no other explanation for the funk that I found myself in, other than it made me realize that I'm still, you know, with all the work that I've done on myself, a year and a half post-retirement, and all the work that I've done, I'm still very much in the trenches. I mean, because you took me, brother, you took me on shift. I was right back there. And it has everything, man. It's got the kid's perspective, the family perspective, the leadership perspective. It's got resilience of Jack. It's got his family, you know, the adverse childhood experiences,
exactly. And the multi-generational trauma.
You know, and I mean, you touch different continents with this book.
And they're all true. I mean the Orador Suglan is a true story. I sat in the village, and this is what's so beautiful when I make the show, I'm going to do a parallel docu-series that goes right alongside it. So you watch Kinda first, you get dragged in, these seeds are sown, but I want there to be a docu-series that you then watch. It takes you behind the scenes, and you see, you know, we interview firefighters and cops, and then we go to Orador Suglan, and maybe speak to some of the relatives of the people that were there then. But this is all true, and you can start not only unpacking these things, but then you can sow seeds for psychedelics, equine therapy, you know, the movement practices that replace, you know, painkillers and surgery, and, you know, talk about the obesity crisis and all the things that kind of come out in this. Let's put solutions. Let's grab people. All right, now I've got your attention. Let's give you some tools. Let's send you down your own rabbit hole so that it's not just Jack, because there's so little fiction in that book. I never got to the darkest of dark places, but so many people on the show did. So I've just been immersed in that. And when I wrote that fucking suicide scene, I would cry almost every time I was writing it. And when I was having to read it to go through it, I mean, it was visceral, even though I myself had never actually been there. But I used my gun when I was describing it. You know, I was looking at my empty gun to make sure I got it as right as possible. But 90% of the calls are my calls. You know,
that's what I wanted to ask you. How much of this?
Most of it, yeah. Yeah, not all though, but most. So there's enough fiction to separate it from being, you know, a biography. But I say really the only fictional characters are the ones in that family. They're basically providing you a perspective of the real world in each of those three generations. So the dad, you know, the Falklands War is real. I had several veterans on there, so I made sure I got everything right in that particular Goose Green conflict. And the shooting that they referred to when he's watching the TV, that was a real thing. I remember when I was little. So all these pieces, and even Mr. Witchard, the PE teacher that saves him from being beaten up by the bullies, that's my PE teacher's name. And we're still in contact now on Facebook, and he's read it. He actually reviewed the story. So there's a lot of truth in there.
Wow. I don't even know what to say about that. I feel like I'm going to have to read it again now, knowing that. Yeah, this will be the first time I've read or listened to a book 3 times.
That's what a compliment, though.
I need to go through it again then, now knowing that, because it's got everything, man. It really does. And something that made me laugh I know how much you hated yourself when you did the audiobook and some of the clips and the outtakes. And it's like, oh man, read my own book. That's going to be easy. Then of course, you had some insight and I was like, oh, this is going to suck.
Mm-hmm.
But you doing the different pitches and the voices and all that stuff, it cracked me up at first. And then I completely lost it because I was so in the story. I attached the voices to the different characters and not just James reading his own book.
Good.
But what is it about Brits that can, and you got to give me the secret here. And if it's, if you don't want me to put it out, I'll take this part out of the show. But how can Brits pronounce French words so easily? Is it bullshit because Americans don't know if that's really the way that it's supposed to be said? or do you just have that knack because you're European too?
Yeah, it's funny because I keep seeing people on Instagram memes and stuff making fun of British people saying croissant. And they're like, oh, croissant. That what people don't realize is that when you're at school, if you're going to learn a foreign language, it's going to be Spanish unless you're up in Canada. In England, French is our first language that we learn. French, and you can sometimes you can learn German. I did both actually. So, back then I love French. I think it's a beautiful language. So I don't speak it fluently, but I still remember some. But who'd have thought that some of that, education would factor into trying to pretend to be French on an audiobook at 50 years old. But
yeah. It was great though, because I went right with Luke and I was like, man, this is really cool. Anyway, enough about that, man. I wanted this to be the middle of the show, like a progression of the story of James Geering, but I'm glad I just started recording. So, man, there have been a lot of things going on since you and I last spoke in your life and my life. And so let's go all the way back to the very beginning. Who is James Geering? Where were you born? Where were you raised? And I'm not going to ask the question that you asked, where on planet Earth are you? Because I know you're in Ocala. So we'll skip that.
Yeah. So long story short, I'm originally from England. I grew up on a farm, had a incredibly unique yet fun childhood. My dad was a veterinary surgeon. So on the farm, we had horses and I would literally, as a young kid, help him in surgeries, and then we'd stop and eat sandwiches and then go back to the blood and guts of, whatever he was doing at that point. Getting told off at school for being half awake, and they assumed I was staying up watching TV, but we were actually lambing at 2 a.m. So really kind of, organic, earthy upbringing. As I progressed through, I developed a passion to want to be a firefighter or a doctor. That's quite a funny story. On the academic route as a doctor, I realized that I wasn't going to be able to get through the sciences, not the level that they want, especially the maths. So that was kind of shut. And then from the fire service, we had the annual physicals every year, and they do the color vision test, that book. So I forget the name, it's a Japanese name. And it was just yes or no. So I can't see all the numbers. And so, right. And they told me you can never be a pilot. You can never be a firefighter. There's all these things, but firefighter was one of them. And when someone in a white coat tells you can't do something when you're a kid, you take it as gospel. So I fumbled around for a long time because that was what I wanted to do. So I ended up getting into, I met a girl. She was at drama school. So I went to get into drama school so I could be with her. Don't know how the hell I managed to, but I did. Ended up realizing that I was the world's worst actor, but I was good at the stage fighting. I was a martial artist, so I ended up excelling in that. That down the road took me to, while I was traveling with her, I went to an audition in Australia when we were out there. They were looking for stunt performers. So I'm like, well, what have I got to lose? So I auditioned for that. And I ended up looking like, if you ever see the Terminator 2 show, the bad guy, Robert Patrick, the motorcycle cop, I could move, but also I looked kind of like him. So I ended up getting the job for the Terminator show in Universal in Japan and opened it there. The relationship before ended, but then I met an American girl. I was out there. We got married, came back to the UK originally, and then moved to the States. Very long kind of sweeping story. When I got here, right before, I'd seen, I think it was Muscle and Fitness, there's an article on a Miami-Dade firefighter. They were a firefighter, they were a paramedic at the same time. And I had this epiphany at 26 years old that maybe I'm not colorblind because I can see colors, which is obviously why I'd be a terrible police officer. It took me 14 years to figure out I wasn't colorblind. So anyway, challenged the medical, ended up getting to Fire Academy, and then that was the beginning of my career, which was in 2004 was my first department.
That brought you to the U.S. So what was the transfer over from the U.K. to the U.S.?
You mean like, was it jolting or?
Yeah.
It was. Well, so I'd had a kind of a heads up. I worked on summer camps for 6 years, 6 summers. And so that was for 3 months at a time. So we'd work with the kids. And then I think we had 4 weeks that we could travel at the end of it before we had to leave the country. So I'd done that for several years. I did it even at the beginning of the round the world trip that ended up in Australia. So that really gave me a kind of immersion into American culture. So I think by the time we moved over here, I'd been here, I'd driven here. That was New York, and we ended up in Florida. So that was different. But I knew I already, liked this country, which is one of the reasons why we ended up moving here.
So even that part's real.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that's so cool. So cool. Didn't even know. Now I'm going to have to go back and read it again. It's like the love story there is awesome, man.
And that's a fusion, that's a blend of things. But yeah, I mean, I had to figure out how he got over here in the first place.
You got me, man. You got me. So several departments here in the U.S. So Anaheim, then Orange County.
Hialeah first, which is just
Hialeah first,
north of Miami. Then Anaheim, then Orange County, and then Reedy Creek, the one that protects Disney.
Yes. Okay. And, listening to your podcast, I mean, you've got more than 1,000 episodes, 6 million downloads. And I love the way that you frame that. It's a free library, over 1,000 references, and it is fantastic. But through all of those departments, and I've heard the differences and the things you experienced, what were some of the pivotal moments in your career? Leadership, resilience, mental health. What were the things that you saw that brought you to one, retirement, and to launch Behind the Shield podcast?
I had what I could describe as a gypsy career in the fire service. A lot of us find ourselves in 1 or 2 departments, and that's when you do your 20, 25 years. But it was just family. I started off, my wife at the time, my son's mother, we met in the entertainment world. And so she wanted to continue that pursuit. So after I went to school in Orlando, she wanted to go down to Miami and kind of pursue the entertainment world there. And that's what took me to Hialeah. And I was so lucky because Hialeah, if you know anything about that city, they have phenomenal firefighters. They used to win ClinCon, which was the paramedic competition. I think they were hazmat pioneers as well, or hazmat champions. But historically, the city has not supported them. And when I got hired there, they didn't even tell us how much we were going to get paid till I think it was a few weeks in. I mean, it was, and it was basically almost half what Miami-Dade got paid. So the firefighters in Hialeah, I have so much respect for because they do so much with so little. But the entrance into the fire service, my academy was excellent in Orlando. But Hialeah, we were hired in the non-cert class. So you had these civilians that went off to EMT and fire school. And so we stayed in the training division and got our asses handed to us for 3 months. And that allowed them to just, crank up the needle. And, we were doing PT week 1, just in shorts and t-shirt. By the end of it, we were doing all our PT, full bunker gear on air. So that's an extra 30 plus pounds, pull-ups and all that stuff. Oh, yeah. So by the time I entered the fire service, they told me this is where you need to be. And it was such a beautiful introduction. Then I go out west to Anaheim. Not so much that intensity, but now it was about knowledge. Because we do vertical ventilation, so we cut on roofs. So you have to know all about building construction. They have a lot of preset hose lays. So they would turn around and say, lay the bundles. That meant a whole orchestrated, set of movements and gear that's pulled off. So from the operational point of view, they were very well trained and executed. And what they did there, I tested, and I always underline this as far as the contrast of, the environment that you and I entered versus the recruitment crisis that we see today. In the written test, in the Anaheim Convention Center, I was testing against 1,000 candidates that were certified firefighters, EMTs or paramedics. They had usually, a lot of them were CDF, so wildland experience. A lot of them were explorers. A lot of them have been ambulance operators. So they had a resume, 1,000 of them. There was 30 spots. So to get that job in itself was amazing. But then they historically would cut 25% of every probationary class just through attrition because the bar was so high. So for a year, you are genuinely in fear of losing your job. You're getting tested every 4 months, there's 3 tests. And then, you were giving classes and just constantly being monitored. So when you came out the other end, and that department was well supported, their city did pay well, and it was a very strong physical fitness kind of culture there as well. So now I've got this initial bar and then I've got the second bar, and it's just been so high. So that was where excellence was forged in those two. Then I go back to East, Orange County. Now you're a mixed bag. There are some phenomenal people in Orange County Fire Rescue, but you've also got the other side, and you've got this large department will just take anyone with a heartbeat mentality. And so, as you know, it attracts the best, the worst, and everything in between. So that started showing me there's another side to the fire service, because prior to that, all I'd seen was phenomenal training. Fast forward a few years, I get divorced. I'm a single dad now. That department is forcing overtime all the time. So we're working 56 hours a week, and now you're told you can't go home at 7 a.m. You have to stay another 24 hours, 80-hour week. Meanwhile, I've got a child that I need to go home to. So I end up going to Reedy Creek, the last one, purely just for my son. So it was family that took me to the West Coast. It's family that brought me east. And then even, when I was divorced, family took me to a department away from fire, really. I mean, they are a fire department, but they're so well sprinkled in that theme park area that they basically never see fire. But it was more about my son and being able to come home. And they had a Kelly day and they were fully staffed. But then sadly, when you've seen such a high bar on one end, if there's just a culture of allowing that bar to come down, that creates the other side of the spectrum. So arguably, I saw one of the best and one of the worst cultures in the States. I saw East-West, I saw different philosophies. So then when I transitioned out, and the reason I did, about 10 years into my career, I just started burying my friends. There were 6 funerals of my friends in 2 years. And so as an exercise physiology graduate, an athlete, a coach, I knew that there was better information out there that just wasn't getting into the fire service. So that's when I started the Behind the Shield podcast while I was still in, just to bring the experts of the world in. I mean, Kirk Parsley talking about sleep deprivation, Sebastian Junger talking about tribe, and, all these people. But then a couple years in, that toxic culture, that complacency, after 5 years of trying to make a difference, I realized that it was having a negative effect on my mental health. And, I wasn't going to change anything. I had Jocko Willink on the show, and he's like, well, you just go up the chain of command. I was like, Jocko, what if the ladder has 4 rungs? That's it. And the top 2 rungs are being groomed by the next one. This is what happens with a lot of departments. So sometimes you can't fix it in. Sometimes you can't promote, as they say. You have to do it a different way. So that's when I took the leap of faith, cashed out my pension and said, screw it. I'm just going to do this full time, because I'm going to apply pressure from the outside instead, and then be a voice for the people that can't speak because they're in uniform. That was almost 6.5 years ago. It's kind of crazy to think about that.
Yeah, there's so many things that I want to unpack from that, but I think I'm going to start at the last thing you said and work backwards if I can remember it. You making the decision to place the profession and the disciplines beyond your own self, beyond your own career. You and I have talked about this during the episode I was on for your show. We've talked about this through text and through social media, but moral courage. I don't think there is a bigger display of moral courage than leaving behind what is a pension and basically, damn everything else, burn the ships. I'm out of here. I'm going to do this, and we're going to do it this way. And you're right. When you're still in the profession or in one of the disciplines, you can't say anything because your career will end. Maybe during, by way of super secret probation and you'll never get promoted and never know why, because nobody has enough character to have a hard conversation with you. But there are so many people in the responder disciplines that are stuck because they feel they have to wait for that, or they are just that badge or that job. And it's a shame. It is a shame. We're going to talk about moral courage too, but I want to go back even further when you said you tested for Anaheim. When I went to the academy here in Florida, I was lucky I had to do the comparative compliance because I had military police experience. So they accepted that as federal law enforcement. So I just had to come here, do a 2-week academy and test out because I'd already had 5 years of experience at that point, plus, certified and all the stuff. So when I went to I believe at the time it was the Tupperware Center and there in Orlando, and I went there and there had to be 300 or 400 people there taking the state exam. And they offered it monthly because that's how many people were doing it. And I remember even before that, when I was stationed in Western Washington, I would go test for small agencies and there'd be 200 people there doing a PT. And you had to do PT before you even set for the written exam, because if you didn't pass PT, they weren't going to waste time with you. And there were like 2 positions. Places like, Tacoma Police, Pierce County Sheriff's Office, stuff like that. And I tested for Gig Harbor, which maybe had 8 employees. So you come here to Florida and, you have all of these openings. But when I tested and applied for Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, there were 4 of us that were hired and my class. And there had to be hundreds of applicants. I started off as a reserve 1. I wasn't getting paid. I went through the Sheriff's Office Academy for 11 weeks at night. Unpaid. I hit the street unpaid, not knowing when I was going to have a job. And that was not uncommon at all. You don't see that anymore. And it's amazing because there is a recruiting crisis and there's a retention crisis as well. And what are your thoughts on the problems with recruitment and retention? We're going to be all over the place today because I had this thing of questions I wanted to ask, and I was so excited, but to hell with it. We're just going to have a conversation, man, because there's some things in here that we need to talk about that people aren't talking about, and it's going to piss off a lot of people with delicate egos, and I'm happy to do it.
Just so you know, first,
whose fault is it?
If I start dropping, this is a new chair, and it just leaks. And through an interview, I go down, then I have to come back up again, and it's insane. Anyway, it's all of our fault. And I'm actually doing a talk on the new firefighter shift, the 2472, that I hope we can get adopted across the whole country. But the reason why it's been such a problem is every single rung of this ladder, whether you're the probationary firefighter or the city and county, council members and the general public, we've all kind of been sold a lie. We, as firefighters especially, have walked around and said, oh, we have the best schedule. I only work 1 day on, 2 days off. I only work 10 days a month. And so everyone around us is like, wow, those firefighters are so lucky. And it's funny because one of the slides that I've got in this presentation now is just not long ago, I had this epiphany, like, I wonder how many days a year we work if you put it into an 8-hour day. So you do the math and you divide it, by 8. The average civilian and the average police officer, if they are on a 40-hour work week, works 260 days a year. A firefighter on a 56-hour work week, if you extrapolate that an 8-hour day is a day, it's 364 days a year. So we've been believing our own lies. And when, like you said, when we came on, I took a job in a fire department. They didn't even tell me the salary. That was how competitive you and I, when we entered.
Yeah. And
we just wanted to do the right thing. But the problem is, because there's that selfless, service in our hearts, it can also be taken advantage of. And I don't think it's malicious by some. I mean, we all know some politicians are horrendous.
I say, hold on now. I think you're giving a little too much praise.
Well, Guy Fawkes was known for a reason, but, I think it's just that we never force change. We just devolved over the last, 20 plus years. So where we are today is you've got the public in 2025 that still think we sit around stroking a Dalmatian, playing cards, and go to the occasional cat in the tree. Even though if they stand in their city, all they can hear is sirens all day long. You've then got city and council members that think that we have this amazing schedule and that we're overpaid. Again, we are basically working for them, and they haven't taken the time to actually find out what our work looks like. So that's, they're at fault there. Then you've got these fire chiefs that are saying everything's okay. You don't need to worry about us. We've got it, and not actually talking about all the issues that they are seeing. Then, like I said, you've got the first responders, the firefighters themselves talking about, what a great job it is, and literally having our, heads in the sand because around us are suicides and overdoses and testosterone depletion and divorces and all the things. And yet we're not having the courage to say this, what we're doing isn't working. So when you've got all the different, rungs of the ladder, all living fairy tales, this is why we're in this crisis now. We don't have the same issues that you have in law enforcement as far as being vilified by the press. But actually, if you look at how quickly that support is lost, you look at the California fires, they're heroes, and now all of a sudden, all these chiefs are on the chopping block. Same with the Grenfell fire in London. If you look at COVID, these first responders, and they're clapping, and then vaccine mandates come out. They're a bunch of murderers, take their jobs. It's fickle. That there isn't real support for the firefighters out there. It's, as the young people say, virtue signaling. Back the blue and all that. Well, where were you when we actually needed you? You know what I mean? When they're making budget cuts, all that.
They were on the other side of the street throwing rocks.
Exactly. So this is why we have to kind of retell the whole story. The reason why we have a recruitment crisis in the fire service today, and I literally just was playing around with AI and Googling, is it healthy to be a firefighter? And it goes, no, and here's all the reasons why. Are firefighters well paid? No, What's the firefighter work week? Well, it's 56, and if they dive a little deeper, you learn what mandatory overtime is. It's an 80-hour work week. I was saying it was the New York Times. It's the Wall Street Journal, because I just Googled it today, did a piece on how Gen Z are leaning into the trades for the same reason. These young people are Googling, is college worth it? Well, you got $50,000 worth of debt and a piece of paper doesn't guarantee you a job. And they're going, well, that sounds awful. So what about welding? Oh, well, welding is, $2,000, and then you guaranteed a, 5-6 figure salary when you work your way up. And they're going, okay, well, that sounds much better. Well, they're Googling, what's it like to be a cop? What's it like to be a firefighter? And they're going, this sounds horrendous. Like, I'm a young person. I've been raised to, if I've had the right environment and I'm the right candidate for fire or police, I've been raised to understand what physical fitness is. I've been raised to understand that mental health is an issue. I've been raised to value my relationships. And you're telling me that as a young person who's in tune with these things, that's the work environment you're trying to entice me into? No, we're not going to. And we're just seeing it. No one can tell me that I'm wrong because the numbers reflect it. We have a massive recruitment crisis. I was just discussing with a police officer the other day. There is a police department offering a $100,000 signing bonus at the moment. $100,000. I've seen fire departments offering $10,000 signing bonus. Again, you and I would laugh if you told us that 20 years ago. So the way that we fix it...
Again, I started for free.
I mean, I thought I was as well. I didn't know how much we were going to get paid. But so the way that we fix it, because it's not the job. Law enforcement is an honorable position. Firefighting and EMS are honorable professions. But it's the working environment that has to change. And so the way that we turn this around, and this is why I'm fighting for this work week, is when you show these young people that you give them a work week that'll actually allow performance and longevity, and you invest in, the gyms that are available in the stations, and you have a mental health counselor that's actually employed by your department, so there's no barrier to entry, and you start that conversation at day one in the academy, and then give, annual whatever tune-ups and all those kind of things. Now these people look at it and go, wow, they really value their people. And that is a change that we got to make. We got to stop wasting money downstream and finally grab that money and proactively put it into our people. And for a lot of agencies, that means hiring more people. That whole defund thing was insane. The fact that was even allowed to grow legs shows you the lack of leadership in many of these areas in this country.
Well, a lot of the people that were supposed to be standing up against that and showing the hard work and the good work that the people were doing were seen taking a knee outside their city hall or outside other departments.
Yep. It's nauseating.
Exactly.
Again, virtue signaling.
Yeah.
Empty Empty
Exactly.
messaging.
And it was the worst. And having worked through that, it was just awful. I'm an advocate, obviously, for getting this information into the academies. We have to start front loading these kids as they come into the responder disciplines, letting them know that these are the things that we have found will happen. These are normal physiological and neurological reactions to the things that you're going to experience. There are going to be toxins. You are going to have to clean your gear. You may have to get new gear, depending on what it was that you were exposed to. And yes, exposed to cancers, type 2 diabetes, sleeplessness, hormone dysregulation, the entire smorgasbord of the things that you're going to experience. These are normal. Instead of not talking about them at all. It's like gun safety. If you teach your kids how to be safe around guns, and this is a gun safe and gun locks and all of these things, and you take away the mystery from it, it's no longer something scary or no longer something that they're going to be curious about and end up getting hurt by. So, you take the sting out of it, and at the very front end, you offer those services. Just like you said, I agree with everything you said 100%. But my question is this: is it a funding issue or is it a priority issue? Because I have seen law enforcement agencies waste money, ask for more money. They're not hiring more people, but their budgets are increasing. And at the end of the year, the end of year requests for end of year money start coming out. Having been responsible or been part of a budgeting cycle for a division at one point in my career, that was the wish list. Oh, buy me more office pens. I want a dry erase board that you don't need. Just the things, what's your wish list? Oh, let's do this and give everybody overtime so they can make some more money at the end of the year. It just seemed to me that money was being spent on ridiculous things, or even given back to the counties and the cities, and not put towards something that was fruitful. Like, hey, everybody gets new vehicles. Well, new vehicles is not giving me more time at home. Stickers, decals to go on the lid of our laptops, saying the sheriff and the chief deputy's name emblazoned with a logo as I drive down the street. That's not doing anything for me. We bought 1,000 of those for what? And that's a true story, by the way. So is it a money thing or is it a priority thing?
I think their priority is money, but it's a false economy message that they are believing in. I had Tulsi Gabbard on the show a while ago, and this is what I kept asking her, because I'm hopefully going to get RFK on as well. The money is there. And if you ever listen to Bernie Sanders talking on Joe Rogan's show, I think Bernie is amazing because that man has stood by his principles the whole time. And I think that everything that he talks about is coming from a good place, which is almost unheard of in politicians. But if you listen to him, he actually talks about, well, the money is being wasted here. This is what will go into funding this, this proactive problem or solution, And I think a good analogy of what needs to change is if you take the UK, the NHS, the National Healthcare, they, to me, have the best healthcare model on the planet because it's basically everyone's chipping in. And the principle was, the young, the infirm, the traffic accidents, the cancers, all the things where people truly need healthcare, that's what it would take care of. And you go to an ER and you get your treatment, you don't have to worry about losing your house at the end of it. But because of, sadly, I think pressure from the US and these privatizations, they've kind of sliced and diced it. And it's coupled with the fact that the British people are getting fatter and sicker, just like the Americans. So now you've got a tax-based healthcare system and you've allowed the consumer to drain it more and more and more. The way it should work is it's a tax-based system. If it solely was, all the emphasis then is make British people as healthy as possible so they don't need to use it unless absolutely necessary. That's investing. The NHS doesn't need more money. They need less sick people. And it's the same with us. Desmond Tutu has a quote. We spend so much time pulling bodies out the river. We forget to go upstream to find out why they're falling in the first place. And this is exactly where we're at in our profession. We don't need more money. If you look at how much is wasted on overtime filling these vacant spots because no one wants to do our job anymore, a time and a half for every single hour, depending on the size of the city or county, you're talking about millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions just in overtime alone. That's not including the cost of a single first responder or cop that you've trained and you've invested in their pension, and then 1, 2, 3 years later, they leave your department. Now you're talking about millions and millions and millions. That's not even factoring in the immense cost of your workman's comp program because you use it so much, the line of duty death benefits, the medical retirement payouts, the lawsuits when we hit someone at an intersection or are too rough with them or push the wrong meds, is millions and millions and millions of dollars. So we don't need more money. This whole, DOGE or Doge or whatever they say, if they actually looked at the way fire and police and EMS has done, you would see all the wasted money. And if you look at the movement in the UK, and it's happening around the world, but the UK, 200 companies, the corporate world, moved to a 4-day civilian work week, not 4 12s, so 4 10s, 4 regular 9 hours with a lunch work day. And they've had the same, if not more, productivity. They found greater innovation, greater efficiency in their workforce, and of course, a happier, healthy workforce. So even if we look at the corporate world, they're doing it so much better, the progressive ones. So no matter how you look at it, it's not about throwing money at the problem. It's about going in and saying, yes, you're going to need a cash injection this year or the next 2 or 3 years to get everything back to where it needs to be. But from here on in, you're going to save your city or county millions and millions every single year, which can then be invested into more police officers on the street. I mean, I think it's insane that we ride 1 to a car in most of the US. Like the force multiplier is 2 cops in every vehicle. Mm-hmm. So that would reduce, the officer-involved shootings and some of the things that lead to lawsuits, because now you've got 2 on 1 and you're able to restrain someone a lot better. So taking that money that's being wasted and investing it where it should have been in the first place is the conversation. And I think, sadly, I wish that the benefit, that the health of our, police, fire, EMS, men and women and their families would be the only thing that you'd need to drive, the administrators to action to force change. But locally here, they've had 4 suicides, another suicide the guy survived, and a 6th one that he left that department recently, was working for another one and took his own life. And unmoved. I mean, as far as anything actually changing visibly, unmoved. And I just don't understand that. So sadly, a lot of these agencies, it has to be about the money. So when you can get them to realize that how much money they're wasting and how they would save money by doing this, that would force the change. And then the byproduct of that would be healthier, first responders, which is the core of my mission.
Mm-hmm. I'm when you were saying that, it came to mind one of the more recent episodes you did, Dr. Ian Dunnigan.
Great episode.
That is, buddy, that is a masterclass on exactly everything that you just said. The false economy of overtime and looking at risk versus benefit. I think one of the things that he said in there, well, I know one of the things he said, I actually had to stop on the side of the trail. I was listening to it on a bike ride and had to do a voice note real quick. Having people assigned to stations closer to their houses. So it wasn't an hour and a half or 2-hour commute to work. It was 10 or 15 minutes. I was like, that's brilliant. Why aren't we doing that? I mean, it saves taxpayer gas money for patrol mm-hmm. cars. I don't have to drive 3 counties out of the way and across my own county to get to where I'm going. You're not paying out insurance claims for crashes because people are still half asleep. The stuff in the firehouse. You guys, I didn't even know this. You guys go to sleep at like 6:30 after running calls all night, and you get the dispatcher waking up the whole house at 7 because it's time to wash trucks and
mm-hmm.
go home.
Exactly.
I'm like, man, that is some bullshit.
Yep.
There should be silence. So the next shift come in, get a handover, wash down the trucks, or, your idea. Why don't we do this at noon? Work noon to noon. I was like, that's a fantastic idea. How come nobody's thought of this?
And that wasn't my idea. That was someone, I think Sarah Jenke and maybe someone else had said that to me. So I won't take credit for that. I mean, I'm shouting from the rooftops now because it makes so much sense. But the simple question, we work 24 hours. We start the clock, end at the same exact place in the clock. So you get to change that wherever it is. And the middle of the day, you get to wake up with your family in the morning, then go to the station after they've gone off to school and work. And then, off you go and you check out your gear. And now it's lunchtime, you eat with your crew and you can have your kind of morning meeting then. And then conversely, just like you said, you just been up all night running calls. It finally dies down, which it usually does, that time of the day. And so now you get to sleep till 9 or 10. You're everything's ready. If you get a call, you get a call. But then when you drive home, as the opening scene in Kinder, you're not having that, am I going to make it? Which God, the number of times I'm like, I just need to get to that exit. Just need to get to that. That is not a good place. Because I was, an hour ago, I was driving lights and sirens with that same brain. It's so dangerous.
No, and that's a fantastic point. I know Doc Parsley's talked about it. I had him on as well, and I listened to his podcast back 3 years ago now on Go when it first came out. And that opened up my eyes to a lot of things. The sleep issues, which led me to operator syndrome and onto this mission now. But there were times when I was working midnight shifts that I was, obviously, if reading the book, that I was going home early. Say, hey, SARS, take over. I can't do this. There are times that I've almost underneath the semi that's in front of me because I've barreled down on them. And, you're doing 80 when a semi is doing 65 and you go underneath them. Nothing good is going to come out of that. I mean, I've run off the road. I don't remember how I got home most nights. You can't do that. I think Doc Parsley said people who work shift work for like 20 years die on average 14 years earlier than the average American.
And I'll add an extra to that because, I think Kirk and I did four, I think it was, episodes together. Here's what scares me even more. If you think about the drill ground, police fire, I would argue they're some of the healthiest people in that community. So if 14 years is the average, compared to the average American, I would say we're actually losing more than 14 because we should be the ones living, in our 90s, hundreds even, because you're that tactical athlete. But the work environment destroys you. It absolutely destroys you.
Well, it does. And circling back to if we knew about this stuff in the academy and we were taking proactive measures as we went through our career, annual checkups. If you work midnights for 3 years, you get a free sleep study on your agency to make sure that you don't have sleep apnea or you catch it earlier, you're optimized. There are so many things that can be done that require leadership to do that. I want to talk about tactical athlete, but I want to talk a little bit more about the 24/72 shift. I know you're a huge advocate of that, and I believe the firefighter lie too. In fact, we hated firefighters secretly when they'd come up on scene. We're like, man, everybody's got a side hustle. They're doing real estate or a lawn service or a fence company or something because they got all this time off. Man, why didn't I become a firefighter? I could do that. And then to realize, man, these guys are getting the shit kicked out of them for an entire career and nobody seems to care. I was at my grandmother's funeral 2 weeks ago, and my cousin's husband, they're both firefighters from Pasco. They're both retired now, but he's a retired captain from Pasco. And we were BSing, and he's like, hey, how's it being, in the retired world? It's like, oh, brother, I should have listened to you. I wish I could have gone at 20 and not 25, but, just having a great conversation. I said, hey, have you heard about the 24/72 shift? It's like this guy that I spoke with, James Geering, he's a huge advocate for it for all of these reasons, blah, blah, blah. And he said, Pasco just went to it. I said, yeah, no, I heard. There's a problem with it. It's going to take like 100 or 120 firefighters like that we have to hire before we can go to it, but it's what they're going to. So I didn't know about that. The manpower things, that's management. And he said, yeah, but the funny thing is the phone won't stop ringing. He says, we've got firefighters from all over the state. So we've got people leaving Hillsborough County, taking less money to go to Pasco. Like I think he was joking, but he said, I think we may have to hire some call takers at recruitment and screening just to keep up with the demand. He says, I don't think it's going to take long for us to fill those positions if that's what it is. And this is just old firefighters talking to old firefighters and not necessarily the management or logistics of it. But apparently people don't give a shit about signing bonuses or prestige with a name on the side of a fire truck. They care about more time with their family.
There's a couple of truths that I found. Like when I got hired at the Creek, there was not even PT. You did the paperwork, you got shown around the parks, you rode some rides, and that was it. you went to work. They gave kind of.
Are they hiring now?
Well,
That
well,
sounds
here's
like
the thing.
fun.
Actually, that was the expectation. One of the things I managed to change with some of my peers, not single-handedly. We put the first ever PT session in the recruit academy. So you had some of these kids that were like, well, men that were like, oh, this is going to be, a cakewalk. And all of a sudden they're carrying sandbar bags and pushing sleds and going up a 28-story hotel that we've got. And most of them thanked me. Some of them, they probably hated me, but good. You came to be a firefighter, not giving out corn dogs in Main Street. So, but the having that bar set, because Anaheim, like I said, the competitive nature, people want to work. A good cop, a good firefighter want to work at the best place. And it's not a competition, but the place that has strong standards. The other thing is we have chased dollars and cents. When I think back now, I don't know how a room full of grown-ups can take 2 years to negotiate a contract, for example. It blows my mind. Like, they just need to go in there and just slap them all in the face, grab them by the throat and say yes or no, But the ultimate currency isn't money. The ultimate currency is time with your family. Because as so many people say this, I'm not, this isn't my quote at all, but, at the end of your career, your job's not going to remember the things that you did. And your kids aren't going to remember the calls that you ran. They're going to remember if you were there or you weren't there. And every time that someone is forced to work overtime and they have to miss a donuts with dad or a ballet recital or a football game or whatever it is, that's something we'll never, ever get back. So I think reframing for us now, putting the onus on us, debunking that fairy tale and asking yourself, what is the most important thing? Because some of my peers, they love to put themselves on Instagram leaning on a pipe pole in front of a house they didn't save. And they'll do their little door prop videos in their shorts and t-shirt and their helmet and their mustache. That's all well and good, but what is the most important thing? For me, the reason why I traveled the country and back was because of my wife and my children. That trumps everything. So if the work environment is keeping you from the most important, nucleus of your world, that's a fucking problem for me. And that is what we need to remember. Shrugging your shoulders and saying things like, oh, they'll never go for it, that'll never happen, is being a coward. And we're talking about moral courage. If you can't be courageous for the people that you love in your family, then the rest is just bullshit.
I'm just going to let that one sit and stew for a minute. No, yeah. And people in positions of authority, they think if they hand out shiny gear or new trucks or more money, here's the pay scale, all that other stuff just becomes more palatable. And I will tell you from a position of experience, having done it the wrong way and the hard way, I never knew what my hourly rate was, and I never knew what my annual salary was until I was looking for my exit strategy. At 22 and a half years, almost 23 years, that's when numbers begin to matter. For me, I was chasing a dragon. I was chasing rented admiration from people who don't speak to me now because they're still doing the job, or because talking to me holds a mirror and it shows them something that they don't want to see. And here I am left with something of my own doing, now building a relationship with my kids, when they're in their late teens. And dad is trying to learn how to undo the damage that I allowed to be done to myself. And as a byproduct of, there were very few things that I missed. A lot of those things, I was standing in uniform in the back of the choir room or behind the dugout. But you're right. The job is not going to miss you. Yeah, they're not. So yes, that's an important thing. I want to talk to you because you keep mentioning this, tactical athletes. Firefighters or first responders are tactical athletes. And I saw you post something today, and I got a little incensed when I saw it. It was the guys doing laps in the lap pool, the Miami lifeguard thing. And I thought to myself, this is such a valid point, because if you're not in good enough shape to make it over a knee wall or up a flight of stairs without getting gassed, to save your own life or someone else's life, why are you in a profession that demands you be ready any second of the day to save someone else's life? You're a liability. And it's something that you spoke about on the episode that I referenced, the tactical athletes and being in shape. Maybe we should tie fitness to something that is punitive. And I remember when I first got hired, we had the physical fitness test, and I remember in the academy, and when I was part of the training division running an academy class, we had PT. CrossFit at the time was just getting started. And I mean, we were doing CrossFit. We were doing WODs 3 days a week, just kicking the hell out of each other. And I would PT with the classes because I thought it was a great deal of fun, and it kept me in shape, kept me sharp, and it bonded me with the classes. Then we had a fitness challenge that was tied to promotion and to, status as a master deputy or a master corporal or master detective. You had to do this. It was a 2.5 mile run, pull-ups, push-ups, this little obstacle course thing, and you had to do it within a prescribed time if you wanted to be eligible for any of those things. Then that went away. And now you have to make it over a 4-foot wall. And there were people that couldn't make it over a 4-foot wall. And then they would have, a personal trainer on staff, and you'd have to go meet with the personal trainer and do yoga and workouts, and here's your nutrition and all this other stuff. But I wanted to go back and I want to go back now and ask the question, why did we ever go away from that? And why is that not important now? How come the 4-foot wall why not a 6-foot wall? How tall are fences? How far is a window off the ground? And, we have to go through a window. It's a mock window, but, we do a dummy drag. Well, if you can't drag me out of a car, and by the way, the dummy is set on the ground now because too many people were hurting their backs pulling it out of the car. I mean, we have lowered every standard to the lowest common denominator, and we wonder why people come into law enforcement with a 33-inch waist, and 15 years later, they're wearing a 42-32 pant. And can that be a reason that people are dying 3 years after retirement? What are your thoughts on, I know your thoughts, but tell us what your thoughts are on physical fitness and staying fit to fight.
There's a phrase that's thrown around the fire service a lot, and it says, would you want you rescuing you? And I get the sense
we have that too.
But I, again, my whole philosophy is much deeper than that. I get what you're saying, but let's put it a little bit more in a kinder realm. Let's make it a bit more raw. How would you feel if your child died because the rescuer hadn't trained? So they tapped out on that stairwell. They couldn't make it over that fence and stop the shooter from going into their kindergarten. Whatever the scenario, I'm not talking about the fittest person in the world wouldn't be able to stop it. Your lack of fitness, you went hands-on with someone and they rolled you over like Humpty Dumpty and then they went and stabbed your wife.
My eyes would be the last thing that person saw.
So that is my point. In a profession where lives are at stake, and the video you're referring to, they've got all these lifeguards doing laps, doing tows, doing, dummy retrievals, all these things. I was a lifeguard for a long time, and only in pools and lakes, but that involved, requalifying every 2 years. You couldn't go to the American Red Cross and go, that's not fair. Why are you making me swim? You either can or you can't. That's the line to be a lifeguard. Now take it to a realm that I never got to, ocean lifeguards. Now you surf and sharks and all these other things. That is just, I'm so in awe of our ocean lifeguards. And, I've had quite a few of the Hawaiian ones on who are kind of like the pinnacle. Them and New Jersey, actually, have got a lot of great lifeguards. And I'm sure there's other ones around the country, California. But, when have you seen, a 42-inch waisted lifeguard? There might be, some of the female and phenomenal swimmers might have a little extra, body weight, but they can absolutely do the job. And this is a misconception. You don't need to look like Barbie and Ken. That's not what anyone is saying.
No.
It's just you can or you can't. The only prejudice that actually has a place in the first responder profession is you can or you can't.
Can or can't.
And the beautiful thing about the fire service is that whether you're gay, straight, black, white, whatever, when you're in gear, all we can see is you can or you can't. That's it. So it's a great equalizer. But to have, and I'll stay with my profession, to have a profession where when you go into the academy and you're expected to do all this physical work in gear, You do the combat challenge over and over again. You do all these evolutions, dragon hose, dummies, climbing stairs. And then when you get your piece of paper, it is called the minimum standards. That's what we call our fire certification. And then you go into the job, and then you're like, they're trying to take our jobs. They're giving us a fitness test. Where the fuck did that come from? Excuse my language again, but I just don't understand the disconnect. You were held to this standard when you walked through the door. And the only, that there's no downside to maintaining it. Then the beautiful thing about us is if you just do the CPAT or a fire sled has a version, they're all fire-specific tasks. You don't need to go to some sports training institute to get them to develop some crazy test. Drag the hose, pull the dummy, climb the stairs, pick up the tools. That's it. Doesn't matter, again, how old you are, what your gender is. You can or you can't, and just maintain that standard every year. That will mean that you perform at a high level. And again, there's still opportunity to be faster, stronger, fitter than the standard. But then, just as you alluded to, the longevity piece. Absolutely. If you allow first responders through opposing fitness standards, and shame on you, administration or unions, if you've ever done that before, you are now adding nails to the coffins of your men and women, because the heart attacks, the strokes, the autoimmune disease, that we're seeing now is rampant. And cancer, cancer is basically a response to stress. The more stress on your body, the higher chance there is of cancer as well. That can be sleep deprivation. It's a known carcinogen, but it can also
Glad you said that, because it's a known carcinogen.
Absolutely. But then it can also be, the insult to the body itself through, inflammation and all the other things. So to then complain that they're trying to take our jobs is the most cowardly response to a fitness test. You should have a fitness test, and it absolutely should be punitive. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that you announce that on March 1st, you have to pass this test or you're fired. Of course not. You've got to do it with an on-ramp. If you've allowed it to devolve, you've got to say, okay, you've got a year, 18 months to get back to where you need to be. But if you can't do the thing, in the meantime, you need to go to fire prevention or training or whatever. Like, you should not be in a cop or fire uniform if you can't do the job. I'm sorry, but that's just, can you imagine a Navy SEAL, 100 pounds overweight, a member of Delta, a PJ?
No, that would never happen, because they would not exist in those
exactly,
places.
Because
they would be gone the second that they didn't meet standard.
Because they hold a standard, exactly. Now, does it mean that the 50-year-old SEAL is still able to whoop the 20-year-old SEAL's ass? No. There's an aging element, of course. There's efficiency.
Well, no, but there's a lot to be said for old man strength.
Oh, absolutely. And but they're still able to do the job. And my point is, no one's saying that you need to be a 20-year-old at 50, but you do need to be able to do the job. And I think there's a lot of efficiency in us older guys where, breath work, stamina, all these things, we're able to do it at a pace that still maintains and still gets the job done. Whereas the young guys, we all know, spazzes out, can still work through it, like doing Murph. But, there's that efficiency as you age, I think, factors in as well. You're just better at throwing the ladder, better at advancing the hose, even breathing while you're climbing stairs.
And to that, I thought, being an amateur triathlete, I thought that, racing 50-year-old guys, 50-year-old age groupers was going to be easy. No, it's not. 50 to 54-year-old age group males in triathlon are some of the most aggressive and competitive there are. But because of efficiencies, they know how to do the transitions. They know stroke. They know when to run, how to, they know the tricks and the move arounds, because they've been doing it long enough. And Jesus Christ, man, you got 50-year-old guys out there still putting down sub 6-minute miles for a 10K.
Crazy.
And it just
look at Mike Tyson.
But that's
not the fight, that was a joke, but the training videos of Mike Tyson at 60 whatever.
It's insane.
And you're telling me that
it's like he's going to murder this guy. I'm like, what happened? Come on, somebody got paid. Anyway, but a lifestyle of fitness and maintaining that level of fitness, that's what you get. I agree that there should be a standard, and the standards should be met at all times. I don't know that we'll ever get back to that. I hope that we do, because you're right. Would I want me coming to save me or my family? That's, but that's a lot to think about.
Well, the other side,
and you see it all the time.
Sorry, I just jumped on. The other side, I just want to be clear as well, is that you've also got to create an environment that forges performance. So when you look at what we just talked about, the crazy work weeks, at the moment, it's hard to ask people to hold that standard because physiologically they can't. They're being broken down. They're gaining weight. It's all part of the sleep deprivation thing. But if we fix that and we get a work week that's, actually finally going to be healthy, then you get to put those standards back and say, all right, in lieu of giving you this performance work week now, this longevity work week, we're going to ask you to perform at the level we should have always been performing in the first place.
Let me ask you this. If somebody comes to you and say that, you're still in an agency and somebody says, okay, all things are equal now. We're physiologically resetting ourselves. We're optimizing shifts, all of these things to allow me to work out. But you shouldn't give me a fitness standard because you don't pay me to work out. What would your response be to somebody that said that? Are you going to give me overtime or a free gym membership so I can go work out? Because it's been said, and you've likely heard it.
Yeah. I mean,
I know I have.
You should have access to equipment. You know what I mean? There should be a main police HQ that has a gym. There should be gyms in the fire station. Now, many that are in the stations that I've worked at, we all bought that equipment. It wasn't that the department, they might have bought some. Back in the day, they were buying all the crappy Globo gym shit that didn't do anything anyway. So we were buying kettlebells and barbells and, bumper plates and all that stuff. But this is where it swings the other way. The environment and the access to equipment is the responsibility of the employer. But the ownership and what you do on your days off is the responsibility of the individual. And you get this one or the other conversation. The answer is both. So if you're not working out because they didn't pay you to do it, then you're in the wrong profession and you should probably go be a librarian. But that being said, if you are a tactical athlete and you take your job seriously and you're at work 4 or 5 days a week as a cop or, 56 hours as a firefighter, then you need to have access to equipment because there are going to be opportunities where you do need to work. They always tell us, firefighters get paid to work out. Not when we're running calls all bloody day, we don't. That's just if we have some downtime, then we'll work out in the busy stations. And kudos to anyone in a busy station that gets a workout in, because it's the last thing that you actually want to do. You're so exhausted, you just want to, take a nap on the lazy boy for 30 minutes before the next call comes in. So I think the answer is if it's one or the other in anything, you're always missing the point. So there needs to be an environment and a culture of fitness in law enforcement, but on your days off, you should be doing jiu-jitsu, you should be working out, you should be going to the range, so because even in the military, you hear about this in law enforcement, especially, there'll be almost no access to ammunition in a job where you carry a firearm for your entire profession. That's insane. But that doesn't mean, conversely, that the only time you ever shoot is when you're at work. If I was carrying a weapon for a living, I know I would be at the range a lot, and even now, like doing martial arts, like I'm not looking to compete, but again, how, you might be, a good Samaritan, it might be in a medical capacity, it might be in a, having to protect one capacity. And I have a firearm, and I'm not a big gun person, but it's a tool that might save someone. I also have tourniquets and trauma dressing in my car. So I'll shoot them and then I patch them up. But, this is the thing. If a civilian is thinking like that, then someone who's paid to be in uniform sure as hell should be thinking about their fitness, their sleep, their mental, mindfulness practices. All these things are going to forge performance and longevity. But if you're waiting for an employer to do it for you, or conversely, your employer expects you to do everything off duty, then you're both missing the point.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you're missing the point there. No, it's a good point. I remember early in my career, I wanted to become a firearms instructor because, one, I wanted to get better and learn the craft a little bit more. The likelihood of you pulling your weapon and firing is very, very slim, but the time that it does happen, you want to make sure that you're proficient with whatever it is you're doing. And at the time, firearms instructors got unlimited ammo every time they showed up at the range. Like, here you go, here's a few boxes, come back if you need more. Well, if you weren't a firearms instructor, you got 200 rounds a month. Then, when the World Terror, caught up and we had to send all the ammo downrange, it became 200 rounds a quarter. So, and deputies would go and get their quarterly draw and not shoot. And they said, no. when you come to get your ammo, you're going to shoot it here and train on this range. It was weird because it started getting pared down, and there were people that just weren't going anymore to pick up ammo.
Mm-hmm.
And it always just seemed weird to me that, this is a tool you may not have to use, but when you need to use it, it's going to be in defense of your life or someone else's life. Why would you let that skill fade? It made no sense to me. What are some of your parting thoughts, and just moving forward with James, the firefighter, the 2472? What do we need to do to change this world? Our world?
Yeah.
Well,
no, but it's funny you put it that way, because I mean, going back to Kinder, that's the point. Is I jokingly have said, if you watch Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, they end up writing the song that brings world peace. And yes, to me, if we were really able to make massive improvements in the first responder professions and fix some of these issues, those same principles would permeate outwards to the civilians. So, my short-term goal is to make an impact on my community. But the reason why, as we talked about earlier, why I'm going to make Kinder into a show is, imagine if people saw something like that on the screen and they're struggling with their weight, or, they've been battling depression, or, they're getting kind of pushed into joining a gang or whatever it is. And they see that that's not the only route they have to take, or they see that they can overcome that back injury possibly with movement rather than getting steel rods stuck into their spine. And now you start spreading that message of hope, then the things that will work for us in first responder professions will also work for everyone else. We're just humans in a costume at the end of the day. So, to me, my grandiose plan is to actually have a ripple effect that helps the whole country and beyond. Because I think it's when you can start addressing some of the issues that truly are preventable when it comes to human suffering, then, I mean, you move the needle. Like, imagine, we talk about freeing up funds. Imagine at the moment, America is 70% obese or overweight, like 43% obese. Almost half the population is clinically obese. Imagine if you were able to just turn some of the things, the way people eat, the way people move, the amount of stress, their understanding of sleep, and you could shift that back to, a low kind of healthy average. I mean, you change the world. I mean, America then would be healthier and happier. And then what would that ripple effect have as far as not Team America World Police, but a true shining beacon of democracy now impacting other countries and be able to help them rather than just go in there and fight for them. So, I mean, the potential is endless. I mean, I'm an incurable optimist, but I really feel like if we can fix our microcosm, that people look at our professions and see, these firefighters and these police officers and these paramedics and EMTs and corrections officers and dispatchers starting to actually change the way they do, then, we're role models in the community. So that would impact the kids. The SROs are all in great shape, and, they've kind of been through some journeys in their own mental health, and they'll be able to interact with these teenagers and tell them about, how amazing, canine therapy has been, or, oh my goodness, you got to try this thing called EMDR. It's incredible. I just, I'm kind of rambling, but I really feel like the pendulum swung so much towards nastiness and divisive division. And I feel like there's an awakening. And I think if we can heal our communities, the potential then for us to resonate out to the rest of the country is amazing. So that's my kind of final thoughts, I guess.
I love it. And I have nothing to add to that. That's fantastic. James, I really appreciate you taking time to sit with me today and to come on the show and just share your message. Beyond words about Kinder, and now One More Light has to be the next step. I think I'm going to read that before I read Kinder a third time, just to see what that's all about. Man, I'm a huge fan and huge advocate for everything you're doing. So thank you for what you're doing on behalf of first responders worldwide. So thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It was an amazing conversation as always.
All right. Take care, buddy. Thank you for joining us today on Tell This Story with our guest, James Geering. His insights into leadership, mental health, physical fitness, and firefighter wellness are exactly the kind of conversations we need to be having. If you got something from this episode, share it with another firefighter or first responder or a leader who needs to hear it. These stories matter, and the more we talk about them, the stronger we become as a community. You can find all of James' work at jamesgeering.com. Check out Behind the Shield podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow James on Instagram at BehindTheShield911.2.0 and grab a copy of One More Light and Kind. Make sure you subscribe to Tell This Story on Spotify, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. And if this episode hit home, give us a review. It helps more people find these conversations. And lastly, to our sponsor, Polestar Coffee, a veteran-owned and operated craft roasted coffee company roasting the best beans to fuel your next mission. Use code THISSTORY at polestarcoffee.com for 10% off your order. And remember, the way forward starts here. See you next time.